Okay, so here we are. This is the panel that I call the Mid-Level Crisis. I am Julie Kaw. I've been an animator for 9 years. I've worked on such games as Tron Evolution, Wolfenstein, the DLC, Freedom Chronicles, and Please Don't Touch Anything 3D. And I am now an animator, a senior animator at Arcane Studios. What?
I'm Jim Pegan. I've also been working for 9 years as an animator in games, and then I had a brief stint in layout and film. I went back into games as an animator on Dungeon Defenders to Smite, and now Paladins.
There's also a mic right there.
So many mic options. Hi everyone, my name is Esther Koh. I'm a gameplay animator at BioWare, where I most recently worked on a little bit of Anthem. And before that, I had a brief stint as lead animator on Paladins at Hi-Res Studios, and I also worked on Smite and the NBA Live franchise, and also Dungeon Defenders.
Hi, I'm James Benson. I've been an animator for about 9 years. I work at Valve Software as a designer, animator. Before that, I worked on a bunch of indie games, made Firewatch, Ori and the Blind Forest, and Fable 3 before that.
And you did not work on Dungeon Defenders.
No, and that's been a sore point for me, actually.
No, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to bring that up. Anyways, so this panel is called the Mid-Level Crisis. So what is the Mid-Level Crisis? Definitely not something that I just made up. But I like to think of it as, it's what I call the time in your career where you're in the industry now. You have some experience under your belt. You made it. You are a game dev animator. And so what now exactly? How do you take ownership of your career? What kind of animator do you want to be? Do you want to be a mocap animator? Do you want to work on creature work? Do you want to be a lead? So what I've done is I've invited 3, and then invited myself onto this panel to tell their stories about the struggle to answer this question, and I'm hoping that it'll resonate to those out there right now who are struggling with the same question. And I will just go first, since I can pick. So I said that I've worked in the industry for about 9 years, and for most of that, I've actually worked at the same company, just shy of 8 years. And when I accepted that position, I was much younger and a lot of things, but I was in a very different mindset and I was in a very different career point. It wasn't exactly what I wanted from a job. I always think that as an artist, one of the biggest things is that you should always be growing, you should always be learning, and I wanted to be part of a team. I wanted a lead that could really help me out in that. And it really wasn't that. It was there was one other animator there, but I was just like, well, I need the experience, and they're offering me the job, and I never know if this will happen again, and I have to go back home to Iowa, and then my parents were really mad at me because I told them I wanted to be an animator, and they're like, that's not a job. And I was just like, okay, I will say yes. I'll say yes to this thing. Super sorry about that. And I just hope that just by doing it, just by experiencing, I would learn a lot. And that just really wasn't, I mean, I did learn a lot. I actually learned a lot about systems. It was a contract. When I was there, the studio did a lot of contract work, so I worked in a lot of different systems, worked in a lot of different engines. But the feedback loop that I was really looking for just really wasn't there. The other animator was really put on a lot of different projects, so I was always alone, and then he left, and I was the sole animator. And a lot of my experience there was they'd be like, here's a character, do something awesome with it, and then I would do something that I kind of hoped was awesome, like, is this okay? And they're like, meh, and then they would just kind of put it in the game. And I never really knew if, I was just really feared that I was getting very complacent. Like, I never knew if never knew how to push myself. I never knew if the level of my animation was actually good enough to ship, or if I just thought that because I was really dumb and I didn't know any better. Because I mean, when I was in school and I made a student film, I thought it was like the best thing ever. And please do not look at it. It's definitely not on YouTube. Please don't watch it. But anyway, I just felt like I really stagnated without guidance. And I also worried, I have this fear that whenever I don't do certain things, I just can't do them anymore. So I worried like I wouldn't be able to take feedback anymore or work on a team. And I think in my mind I knew that like I wouldn't really bite anyone's head off if I did it, but they were never really put into practice. So I was just like, maybe I've just been ruined forever. But when I also thought that I should maybe go elsewhere, but I have this thing that I call the Marty McFly syndrome, which is another made-up term, and it's basically whenever I try to apply somewhere, I'm just worried they'll be like, "You're no good, man. Like, you got no future in this industry, kid." And I just never really wanted to try and have people tell me that. And I had a lot of imposter syndrome too, where I was kind of like, man, I really tricked my way into being an animator here. I've tricked all these amazing people, and maybe I can't pull that same con again, because if I try elsewhere, then it'll just kind of unveil me for the amateur animator that I kind of already knew that I was. So this all kind of culminated in GDC last year, where I came here for the first time. And I got to talk with other animators. I came to Animation Exchange, and I realized like I really wasn't alone. There was an entire community out here. They were really, really excited about, they're working on cool things. They're really excited about it. And I went back to my studio. I was really excited to work on stuff. But the nature of that, that studio was there's a lot of contract work, so there happened to be a lot of dead time in between projects. And I just didn't have anything. I could feel like the thing kind of going away. And there were more inciting incidences. I'm part of a podcast called Keyframe of Mind with Esther Ko, and two other amazing animators, Jenny Sun and Katie Better, shout out to them. And we talk about our lives as the game devs, and that also was one of my connections into the community. I always felt like I was hopefully giving back. We kind of do a lot of what we're doing here, meandering and talking about ourselves, and then hopefully that they resonate with other people. And the other thing that happened was I was part of Rise and Spline, which was a animation class that was being streamed on Twitch, and that was getting me animating, that was giving me critiques, it was being streamed, people had to like see my terrible spline passes, and it was just something that I felt like was helping me grow. And when that ended and Keyframe of Mind wasn't recording anymore because everyone's having these big life changes, it just made me feel very isolated from the industry, and I kind of started to panic. And it really just kind of pushed me over the edge. And I was just like, well, I'm really, like, I'm unhappy here. I don't think I'm growing. I don't know if I'm good enough, but also, like, what exactly am I scared of? Because what's on the other side maybe can't be different. Why am I stopping myself? I just started applying everywhere, and I was also like, hey, people that I met at GDC, please look at my terrible work and, like, tell me what's terrible about it and how to make it better. And honestly, just like these things that I always thought was important in my career, like, you know, being part of a group, contributing, I always said that they're important, but all I was doing was kind of sitting there and being like, why won't it change? Why won't it just magically come up around me? And that was very dumb and non-active of me anyway. So I started applying everywhere, and what I realized when I started applying places was like, I am really bad at interviewing. I've been really lucky in my career. And I don't mean like they just kind of gave me jobs, but just like when I got out of school, I had an internship there, and I worked hard for it, but I just didn't have to interview a lot. And I was just very unprepared. And I mentioned during the podcast that our latest episode, which is kind of about all these life changes, that interviewing is kind of like a zero-sum game, or applying for jobs is kind of a zero-sum game. You kind of like, you know, you put yourself out there, and that takes a lot of effort, and then you interview, and that takes a lot of effort, and then you do these like art tests, and that takes a lot of effort. In the end, you get the job, or you don't get anything. So like, it's kind of like you're back at square one. But now that I have distance in it, and I haven't been turned down quite so many times, it actually realized that because I was so bad at it, because I had to interview over and over again, every single time I was actually getting more and more information. They would ask me questions like, you know, what is your favorite thing to animate? Or like, what don't you want to animate? Or what is your ideal studio? And whenever they asked me that, I was like, man, I never actually thought about those questions before. Like whenever they're like, what do you like to animate? I'm like, they give me stuff to animate, then I animate it, then they put it in the game, and I like that, like, I don't know. And so as I got to interviewing with places, it actually started filling in those holes. Like, I was like, you know, the studios would be like, I just realized I was very ignorant about the industry. I didn't know how studios worked. I'd only been at 2 of them. So they're like, this is how our studio works. And I was like, yeah, I like that. I want that. And every single time, my answers for that got more and more definite. And it kind of culminated in, I was always really interested in Arcane, and then when Arcane came, it was like, you know all those things that you're looking for? Right here. And the really scary thing about that is like, once you see it, you're like, yeah, give me that, like, but it, you know, you might or might not. The nice thing about it is I did get that job, and throughout that process of struggling to find another job eventually, it made me answer those questions of like, why was I restless in my other career? What did that job have that this job doesn't have? Like, what exactly am I leaving it for? When you have a job that you don't actually have to leave, you can just kind of stay there. You have to kind of define, why you want to make the step. Why do you just like putting things in boxes and like moving to another place, or is there a real reason behind? It's like whenever David Gibson would do our Rise and Spline stuff, he would ask us questions like, why, like, you have this creature climb on the box, like, what was his motivation of climbing on the box? Like, no one actually had ever asked me, like, what's your motivation for being an animator? And, it was like, I saw Toy Story, and I loved it. It made me cry, and thought it looked cool, and, like, I don't know, seemed fun, not doing anything else with my life. So, I just that kind of answered those questions for me, and I thought putting it into words, it really opened up my worldview. So that's my story. Jim, would you like to go next?
Did James have something to say?
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. So sweet. Thank
And
you.
now pass it on to Jim. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Jim.
And now you're done talking. So now Jim.
My mid.
I'm sorry. I talked nonstop for like 15 minutes, and then I was like, and Jim. So Jim, what is
Level crisis
yes.
is happening right now.
on screen? We were watching this happen. So what was the point in your career where you kind of answered that question for you? What did you want from your animation career?
So the majority of my game animation career has been on like live games. So they've been out for a number of years and are just like adding new content every few weeks or months. So I was hired as an associate at Hi-Res, associate animator, and I was there for 3 years, just kind of working on Smite, adding new characters to the game. I don't know if it was like 35 gods that I worked on.
That's a lot.
It was just a lot, and then like dozens and dozens of skins and stuff. And I saw that the other game, Paladins, was starting up their development, and their characters were a little more like my sort of jam.
Yeah, your kind of animation style, the stuff that interested you.
The stuff that I was more interested in it just on a personal artistic level. So I kind of, because I had been on the team for like 3 years and we had like 20 animators on Smite, I was like, hey, can I go over and work on that other game?
Can I go play with other people?
And they let me do it for some reason, and that's been super fun. I've been on that game for like 2.5 years now. But it's another live game. It's just out there, and there's more stuff we just add. There's not a ton to figure out about it.
Thought that with the new kind of style, the new game, that it would kind of give you new challenges, but they were just kind of similar challenges than you had.
I mean, it had different things like Smite is a MOBA. If no one's heard of it or played it, it's a third person MOBA. And there's like now 100 gods in it, and they just fight each other. Whatever, I don't play it.
Selling this game real well, please.
No, it's great. Everyone loves it. But Paladins is a first-person shooter, and that's like more closer to the kind of games that I like to play. And it was like a new task that I've never had to do before. Just like there were things to learn about it. I'm still like getting into first person stuff. Like it's just not part of my, innate skill set. They didn't teach it in school. But after a while, I started to feel like, well, what are my options? Like, where do I keep growing? Like, how do I keep growing? How do I keep learning? And like where is my career gonna go if I just keep doing this thing? Because it's a lot of fun, just like having like every few weeks, just having a brand new character to play with. Um, it's a lot of fun, but like it's
It's still
on
pretty
a
similar.
live
Yeah.
game, like all the questions are answered. Like you don't have to develop new systems or like really think that much about like gameplay stuff. It's all just
It's
kind
all
of
different just because the characters.
figured out. Yeah, we're not developing anything for a couple years and releasing it. It's like kind of plugging things in that already have like a very strong base to go off of. And it's still super fun. But for me, I didn't know how long I could keep doing that and be satisfied. So I was thinking, well, should I apply to other places? Do I want to?
Cinematics, right, for a little bit too.
Yeah, do I want to get back into cinematics? Because I did 3 years of previs slash layout animation at Real Effects, and it was really fun. But it was definitely a detour to what I was wanting to do from the start. So I had all these like layout skills, and I wasn't really able to put them to use in the games I was working on. So I was like, maybe that would be a good thing, or maybe I should expand my skill set into mocap. I had brief experience with that at my first job where I worked with Julie 9 years ago. Or did I? Yeah, there were a number of things that I wasn't sure like the best path for me, and the one that I didn't really consider for a long time was like taking on more of a senior slash leadership role, because it's just, I don't know if you can tell from my posture and manner of speech, but I'm pretty timid, and it's not really like my strength. So around last year, I was really thinking about just completely changing where I was and who I was working with and stuff. And it took a lot of conversations with Esther, who I was working with at the time, and Julie and a lot of the other animators here, actually. And and right when I needed to make a decision, Esther was relinquishing her lead role, and the opportunity came for me to take up the lead on Paladins, and most of it was through her encouragement. I said, yeah, sure, let's try it, and she left, and it was horrible, and then.
There was utter depression. The entire studio burned. She might have burnt it down. We all don't know.
Yeah.
Question.
But no, I stuck around. I found I was able to sort of build on the work she was doing and the other leads that I had on Paladins to what's the word? Facilitate better communication between our departments. We were asking for tools from rigging and the tech art team that we just like it didn't even occur to us to ask for. And because I was just like a grunt worker, I just kind of put my head down. I was like, gee whiz, it sure would be nice to have this thing. And it just never occurred to me to ask for it. But like now it was just me leading other people, and I was like, oh, that's actually my job now. So I've had to like really get into my discomfort zone, not out of my comfort zone, but into my discomfort zone. And it's actually like, I think I already said it, but it's been super great.
Do you find it rewarding in a way that like what do you find rewarding about it? What in that job has?
Well, I can solve problems. The one thing I really was not looking forward to is not being able to animate as much. But knocking all obstacles out of the way so that everyone else can like just focus on their work and not have them doing like tedious extra tasks that can be solved like through outsourcing or through like tool development, or just me taking all of those extra things and then letting the rest of the team go. Like, it's really made our, I don't know, it feels really good just being able to empower the rest of the team to do their thing.
I think it's just a very different kind of problem solving than you have for animation, where it's just like, yeah, like how do you can figure out how to, smack a dude. It's going a really weird.
I've never smacked a dude.
Whatever. It's like, instead of trying to figure out different ways of attack, which is probably the proper terminology, I'm an animator, guys. It's a different kind of problem solving because you're trying to solve problems for your team now.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a problem with how there isn't much visibility? I feel like they have this thing where in interviews they'd be like, "What do you see yourself in 10 years? Like, what do you want to do?" And I was always like, "I want to run a studio, maybe, because I feel like I should feel like I have goals." But I mean, actually, I really don't want to do that. That sounds
Yeah, my only plan forever was just to do work, just doing animation. Just the thought of having to lead people and go to meetings and like plan stuff. I'm not super organized in a structured way. Unlike Esther, who was super organized.
wow, Esther, way to be super organized.
No, I only say that because
You
she's my friend, and
level that more, my friend. But yeah. But I'd say I don't think I feel like they never have much visibility into what makes a lead position. I feel like everyone goes to school because they want to be the rock star animator that does the thing. They can point at it and be like, I animated that. I did the moving thing.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and we're a smaller team than Smite, so it's a lot easier for me to just wrangle 4 to 6 people than 19.
And how do you feel about, like, I know you're worried more about, coordinating with people, with those social skills. How did it feel now that you use them? Was that fear?
It's been great because, like, every other lead in the art department on Paladins is like me. And really just, well, I don't want to talk about myself, but really
that's why I have
easy
you on
to
this
work
pod-
with.
Yeah, that's why I have
Just
that's why
like,
I have you on this panel to talk about yourself. So
well,
please speak more.
they're just like really easy to get along with. We all just want to make a really cool game, given the time and resources we have, and that's been really the only reason I've been able to keep doing it, and I hope I can keep doing it for a while. Like there's stuff now that I want to accomplish on the team. I have a sort of a vague roadmap of like how we can continue to just make things better for everyone, and like have more communication between everyone, and make sure everyone is like growing and like doing things that are applicable to their career goals, and just making sure everyone else can be fulfilled in their job. That's like, it's a roundabout way of becoming satisfied that I just didn't even consider until I had my mid-level crisis.
Thank you. It's like that time in the movie where you say the name of the panel. Thank you for doing that again and again. All right, so.
Who's next? Oh, this next.
Yeah, not your time to talk yet.
I apologize.
Okay. Esther, so what about you? What was your mid-level crisis?
I think I reached this point around last year. Basically, when I got into the industry, it was after like maybe 5 years of really having an identity crisis and struggling through 6 different majors, thinking maybe I'll be a psychiatrist, and then did environmental engineering, and then I did graphic design, which is definitely what my mom still thinks I do. And then and then I ended up majoring in economics. I graduated with that, and I was just really lost. So by the time I found out that working in games and being an animator was a thing that I totally really wanted to do and was so passionate about, that was all I focused on. I just tunnel vision on, okay, be a really good animator, like make up for the lost time, just take all the classes and, overwork yourself and overcompensate for all your insecurity about starting later, and, keep reminding your mom you're not a graphic designer, and just really think about that. And it was more just about focusing on myself and, making my progression upwards. And then about the time that I was maybe 2 years into in the industry, my animation director, Craig, he's definitely not watching this, but Craig, you're awesome. He was my director at Tiburon, and he was just such a role model. He's like an incredible person, and he's one of those leads that you realize he's so busy, but every time he comes by and he sits down and talks to you, you feel like you're the most important animator, and that your career goals and everything you're contributing to the game that you're working on are the most important to him, that you are a priority, that you matter no matter what level you are, whatever your experience level. And that meant so much to me coming in as an associate, as someone who was still confused on, why am I here? Why did you hire me? And from that point on, basically every time I had an interview for, you know how like in jobs they ask you, oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? What are your long-term goals? And Craig was my answer. I would say, one day, a million years from now, 5 billion trillion years from now,
Craig.
I want to be Craig.
You just stop talking.
That's it, like no context. But he was like, my like hashtag career goals. But that was also always just something that was really far away. I figured, at some point I'm going to work on that. But I'm still new. I'm just an animator, and I'll just focus on that. And I never really took decisive actions towards, maybe building up some leadership skills or anything that was me actively trying to pursue making this a reality sooner than later. So basically what happened it was a little bit more than a year ago at Hi-Rez, while I was still there on Paladins, our current lead at that time, he moved to another project. And for some reason, they decided to let me step into that role. And being suddenly launched into a lead position, I was terrified. I was so scared because I was pretty sure like everyone was just going to be overworked because I couldn't say no, or the animation on Paladins will suddenly become the worst animation in the history of video games. And I just felt like everything was going to be my fault, and I would let down my team because I had no experience. I didn't know what I was doing. And
I was going to kill video games.
I was going to kill video games single-handedly, which now I realize is extremely self-centered.
No, it's definitely going to happen.
But I was panicking, and I was really afraid of just failing everyone on multiple levels, and also just being really aware of the fact that, as like a woman of color, I was stepping into a role where I didn't see a lot of other people that could mentor me or that maybe understood my experience. So there were multiple things that were terrifying me. And but what I found in the time that I was lead on Paladins was that it's an incredibly fulfilling thing to be able to advocate for your peers. And also I was lucky enough to have an incredible team. My teammates were all like extremely self-sufficient. They were all better animators than me anyway, so I could just be the support role. And I thought that was such a great experience. I really loved that, I had the power to be able to help negotiate a raise for someone who had been overlooked for one, or help to create better culture between our different departments if we were having communication issues. Because instead of being at the level where I could complain about it, I actually could be in those meetings and have a voice for my department. And I thought that was a really, really great experience. So at the same time, I also realized I had this huge knowledge gap. I've only been, and at that point I've been in industry 6 years, and especially, at GDC, you look around and you're like, dang, these people know things. They've experienced things. They've done incredible things. And I can see that there's this gap between where I want to be and where I'm at now. So that experience was a great stepping stone for me in terms of, okay, this is for real the direction I want to take. And now I'm going to start actively working towards that. And that's around the time that, I decided to help Tim out with the animation roundtables, which is really horrifying for me because I super hate being in front of the camera. And whenever I always tell my friends this, they know this, like when there's more than 4 people in the room, I stop talking. And now I'm gonna be talking in front of all my peers who I super respect, and I'm gonna have to like guide them in conversations that are interesting or something. And just doing things like when I took the position at Bioware specifically because I knew it was gonna just throw me into a whole new zone of learning with all these teammates who had worlds of experience more than me, and these were all the little things that I was trying to do to pursue that role actively instead of passively thinking at some point maybe I'll do it, turn into Craig. So
You know, you just have to take him and then consume his existence, and then that's how you turn.
I'm so sorry, Craig.
I'm so sorry. I love you, Craig. I don't know you. Hello, Craig. Yeah, so that was your journey. And do you find it fulfilling at Bioware that do you regret leaving your lead position to find more knowledge at Bioware, or do you think that's happening for you? Do you want to go back to the lead position at some point?
I want to, but in the long term, right? Because I know I feel like, at least for me, I prefer to be the kind of lead that is speaking from some sort of experience. You know, it's like they teach you with being a game animator, like you're not going to be a perfect technical artist or VFX person, or you're not going to, I mean, depending on the role, but generally you might not really know everything about the pipeline around you, but ideally you know enough about it to communicate, right? Like a T-shaped employee. Simon Unger taught me that, that term. And for me, that's like the kind of lead I want to be, but I don't have that like broad spectrum of experience that I want to have to be the great animation lead that I want to be in the future. So not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, but soon. You're on your way.
That is the hope, you know. Ideally, like I'm not trying to be, I'm going to be amazing and like change worlds, but it's just whatever team that is unlucky enough to have me as their lead in the future, I hope that at least I can be someone who facilitates positive, constructive change. That's something that's really important to me, to be able to open doors for other people and just create good things with good people.
And not kill video games.
And not kill video games.
We love
I
it.
don't want to do that. I really don't.
Thank you so much for sharing. James, it is your turn to talk.
Finally.
Yes. You're waiting so patiently, and now it'll pay off. Please talk for many hours.
Okay. So I guess my mid-level crisis happened like 8 years ago. So it was the crisis began quite thick and fast once I joined the video game industry, and it's barely abated since then.
Weird ways. But continue, please.
Just this, Julie.
I'm so
You know that I
sorry.
was going to say this. No, so I started looking into getting into games. Strangely, when Bioware Austin was opening up, they were looking for writers for the Star Wars MMO. And I don't know why they did this exactly, but there was sort of like this open call on the Penny Arcade website, which was essentially like, if you have been like a dungeon master for pen and paper role-playing games, then you might have the kind of thought process that we need for writing a Bioware.
You're like, I am a nerd, so yes.
Yeah, exactly. I ticked all those boxes. I was a sad little boy. So, anyway, this was when I was at university before I flunked out, and I thought, well, I've done that. I can do this job. And knowing now the visa process, what a funny idea that I thought I could get a visa at the time. Anyway.
You're young and stupid. So
Yeah, never mind. That's inside. So I did a writing sample, which was like building a Neverwinter Nights module. It was very, very terrible, very bad, and they didn't respond to me. But anyway, it was sort of fun, and I thought, well, I did like that a little bit. So anyway, I dropped out of university and sort of thought, well, I should probably try and hone a skill of some kind. And I thought first I'd do 3D art. I thought I'd make models, just because I'd done a tiny little bit of that as a teenager. I thought, well, whatever, do the easy thing. So anyway, it turned out.
Modelers out there will love to hear that their job.
Well, if you'll wait for me to finish my sentence,
Sorry.
it turned out that it's terribly, terribly difficult. And so again, I thought, not for me. I don't want to do that. But in the course of learning 3D modeling, I worked on some mod teams and things, and obviously no mod team ever has an animator. ever. So when I made like a first-person shotgun model and stuff, and had to rig and animate it myself. Actually, no, the first thing I animated was a weather vane. I made a weather vane for a prop. I thought it'd be quite good if it wiggled and jiggled.
As weather vanes do.
Yeah, exactly. This one was made of jelly. So anyway, what I found was actually that that was a lot more fun than modeling, and also I don't know, it seemed closer to something that I could learn quickly than 3D modeling. That sort of felt like, oh, I'm going to have to go to like art school and learn to be a sculptor, and
Good job. So you're saying that animation is unskilled. Continue
it's
talking.
quite
as
unskilled.
skilled
Yeah, it's quite
animators.
easy, isn't it, animating?
Okay, great.
So,
Glad to have you here. James.
so yeah. Anyway, I got quite focused on this, and also I was quite obsessed with doing it quickly. I sort of like set myself this thing where I said I've got 3 years to not just get a job, but I really wanted to work at Valve. Valve was like my super duper dream place, and Half-Life was my favorite game. Blah blah blah. So I did a thing which I do sometimes, which is I just told everyone I know I'm going to do this. So like I told my mum and my wife, girlfriend at the time, in 3 years' time I'm going to work at Valve Software. And animation was like the quickest route, it seemed to me. So anyway, with that in mind, I started sort of like working out how to do that quickly. I thought I might go to Animation Mentor or do one of those things, but I didn't really have any money, so I couldn't do that. So I just sort of learnt on forums and things, and I sort of post all my work and get feedback and do that again and post it all on YouTube and that kind of stuff. So anyway, at the end of that year, I got really lucky and I found my way into an interview at Lionhead and got a job there. But I still was very much like on this track. And I even
Trying to work at Valve.
I was trying to work at Valve, yeah. But it wasn't for any particular purpose. Do you know what I mean? I think ultimately what I wanted was to be stood next to the people who I thought were really respectable, and to sort of, by association, also become respectable. But I wasn't really like, I wasn't making games or anything. Do you know what I mean? My reel was very targeted. It was like, what is the absolute most succinct, quick, like get rich quick version of
Again, I love that you're saying this in a room full of animators. This is very touching, James.
No, what?
I want to see you walk out of here.
I wasn't going very deep. So so what I mean by that is I wasn't like putting loads of stuff in an engine and learning like, oh, you blend these two things together and da 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 da. It was just literally like, how can I walk into a room and convince someone wrongly that I could animate a computer game?
Wow.
So anyway, I did that and I got the job at Lionhead. But I was, but Lionhead doesn't exist anymore. It's all fine
You hired
now.
this show.
Yeah, I got hired by a guy called Cy Jakes.
Oh, yeah, please name him. Thanks, James.
He's the one who did wrong. Anyway, I love you. You were a really good lead. Thanks, Cy. So anyway, I was getting the bus to work after maybe like 6 weeks at Lionhead or something. And there was a woman, one of my colleagues, was like, oh, yeah, just chatting. And she said, oh, I'm going to GDC in a couple of weeks. And I thought, hang on, can we do that? Are we game developers? That's really cool, because I read about like GDC on Kotaku and stuff. All right, well, hang on. I've got exactly the amount of money that it costs to get a plane to GDC. I'll spend all that money. I'll do that.
Good job.
So
Smart career making.
me and my wife Jenny went to GDC, and it was a bit weird because I just got a job in the industry, but I was very much sort of like, I don't know, I still had something to prove in some weird way, and I was like still very focused on getting a job at Valve. So I went around everywhere, giving my reel to everyone at the expo floor and just sort of doing the rounds, and arranged loads of callback stuff and interviews and all that kind of stuff. And again, at Lionhead, my job, I was like super duper junior. It was like really cool to learn like how do you commit files to Perforce? I know it's like boring, but just
Found that part exciting.
game dev stuff. Oh, that was fascinating. It was things like
Really weird.
retargeting Fable 2 animations onto Fable 3 rigs and fixing when the twist joints bug it up or whatever. Anyway, so I was sort of taking that for granted. And in hindsight, I was being really selfish and stupid, honestly. And I wasn't really taking everything I could from Lionhead. I was being very much like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the stepping stone?
Did you talk to Valve when you came to GDC?
Yeah. So I went to the Valve booth, actually. And it was interesting because everyone else, the thing was, my reel was quite good for someone who'd been animating for a very short amount of time. For someone who'd been animating for any real length of time, it was very bad. But like for a very, very first reel, it was quite good. So a lot of people sort of, for lack of a better phrase, were blowing smoke up my ass a bit as I went around the floor. And then the Valve representative I talked to, like, didn't like shit on me, but was like, okay.
Blowing smoke up your ass and shitting on people is not something that happens at GDC. I just want to make
No,
that
GDC is a
clear.
lovely place. It's perfect. You should come. Yeah, no, but so she was really, really realistic with me. It was sort of like, okay, I like you have an okay reel. Like, why did you make a reel like this? What were your decisions? And like, what kind of stuff have you done in games? What kind of games do you want to make? And was asking me lots of questions that I wasn't prepared to answer, and didn't know the answer to. So that sort of sent me back to the drawing board a bit, and I basically decided, like, okay, great. Well, what I took away from that sort of was, rather than like going away and trying to work out, like, to have some substance to myself, I thought, I need a better veneer.
Yeah.
I need a
I
more
need to be even shallower, but really pretty shallow.
exactly, yeah. I need to peacock even harder with even less going on.
Very good.
Yeah. So so what I did was make this sort of YouTube channel, and I made lots of fan art, essentially, like little short films that were based on existing properties. Yeah, so I did all these dance animations of TF2 characters doing like Michael Jackson routines or whatever. Again, very cynically. This doesn't paint me in a very good light, actually.
I know, that's why I have you here. Go ahead, come on, dig in that hole, James.
Yeah, so I did all that, and it was very cynical, like, okay, existing intellectual property plus pop culture reference equals view count. And it turns out people are quite manipulable in that respect, and so that worked out quite well.
I'm going to make a list of all the people that you're insulting.
Yeah, so, and the point being, essentially, like, can I get
A job at Valve.
Can I get Valve to email me and say, "Oh, I saw your YouTube video," or also, like, I was super duper up for like other stepping stones on the way, like just
To Valve or just?
yeah, to Valve, right? Like other companies that would be, I felt like some kind of career progression-y thing. Anyway, so whilst I was doing all that, and that was working out quite well, the project I was on at Lionhead was cancelled, and I was a contractor, like a full-time contractor or whatever. And we were all let go. So, but I was really, it was a funny old situation because I was like getting pretty good traction on all this stuff.
too?
Yeah, and like doing the TF2 videos, I'd had things where like I'd applied to Rockstar in Edinburgh, and they'd said no, they weren't interested. And then after the YouTube stuff was coming out, they called me back and like, oh no, we actually, do you want to come up here? And I was kind of like feeling this sense of like, oh, people are.
Yeah,
This could actually do something for me.
You kind of felt your star rising, and you're like, and the top is like Valve, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I totally would have like moved to a bunch of other companies if I felt that was like some way on the trajectory. So anyway, all the contractors were let go off that project, and I sort of went home to my flat, my wife, and I was like, "Oh, I've been let go," and she's like, "Why are you smiling? Isn't that bad?" It's like, oh, now it's not going to be awkward. Like if I get some other thing that I want to go to, and like I can concentrate on my YouTube stuff. And like, all right, but we do like live in a flat and everything. And like, what are we going to do? It's a bit weird. Like, do we have to move out of Guildford? Anyway, so we did. We moved back in with my mum. So
The answer was yes.
yeah, the answer was yes. But anyway, and so I got entirely focused. I wasn't even earning any wages now. I was just like, I was no longer in the game industry. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have a job in the game industry. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do full-time, like this.
Concentrate on the Valve.
Yeah, the grasping.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a full-time grasper. And so I was doing like art tests for Blizzard and things, but also doing like viral Valve type bits and bobs. But then for some other reason, I got a random email from a guy who was like, "Hey, I'm making an indie game, da 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 da," and he in the link, it wasn't just because usually a lot of people would email me about like, "Hey, do you want to work on my game?" but with nothing, and it was a link. But this was back when Unity, you could embed an executable on a web page, and so I was just like playing his game, and I was like, "Oh, this is quite fun." Didn't think too much about it, but he was like, "Hey, if you ever wanted to do some animation with us, that'd be cool." And I was like, "Well, I don't have a job, and like, it might be fun to do this
Might as well.
in
Right.
between my like YouTubey stuff."
In terms of being a grasper.
Yeah, exactly. In between grasping, I thought I should do some work. So anyway, and so I'm sort of like half doing tests and trying to make like Kotaku blow up about something I did, but then also like half.
Wouldn't impress Mr. Kotaku. Continue.
Yeah. Me and Mr. Kotaku have a fantastic relationship, and please don't get between me and Mr. Kotaku.
All right, fair enough.
So, so the thing was though, I started doing a bit of stuff, this indie stuff with these people, and it was really the first time I'd actually done any
Game
proper
design?
game design, yeah, and like game development generally. Like it was.
Thing that you were interested for in the beginning, right? Was the narrative game design.
Yeah, it was. I sort of was like doing real game development stuff in a way that I'd done a little bit at Lionhead, but it didn't. I was so junior that like I was hardly doing anything at all, and so. But again, this was sort of on the back burner in terms of like the important thing in my life. Anyway, so I did a bunch more of this YouTube stuff, and I flew out and interviewed a few places in America, and eventually I did go and have like an in-person full loop at Valve, and I was like, this is brilliant. And I remember, you know, it was
This is a dream.
this was the whole point. So that was great. And basically, through my interview loop, I was just atrocious. I was terrible. I was really bad because they would be like, well, why did you do X? I was like, well, because I thought you'd think it was good.
Yeah. I just want you to think I was cool.
Yeah, no, totally. It was
Love
that. And he'd be like, what was your decision-making process behind X, Y, Z? It's like, well, people like, you know, dancing, and people like Team Fortress. Thought they'd like them together. Thought it'd be funny.
Wonderful.
And obviously, it was cool to have done a thing that people like watching or whatever, and my animation was getting okay, but it was really shallow, that's the thing. I had a really, really shallow understanding of animation as an art form.
So did you get that call back then? From Valve?
No. I didn't start working at Valve 8 years ago. They said, no, thank you.
Yeah. So then what happened after you went back?
What, went back to England?
Well, no, after you had that interview, then.
Oh, at Valve. Yeah, so the thing was, you know, some time had passed, and actually, by the time I went for this interview at Valve, the indie game that we were making on the side had become more and more of a thing. Like, I'd really gotten interested and invested in it, and it was still like, oh, I still wanted to go and work at Valve, but it would become a thing that was like pitchable, you know? It was like a real prototype. So it was being pitched around by the guy who was the sort of owner of the studio, and weirdly, that the pitch was successful, and that was communicated to me strangely on the day I was going to my Valve interview. So in the hotel in the morning, I was told like, "Hey, we sold it." This was a game called Ori and the Blind Forest, which I went on to finish and make. He was like, "Hey, we sold Ori. This is great," and I was like, "Cool." I don't
Go on my interview now.
I don't think I'd mentioned that I was in a hotel room in Bellevue. So anyway, and after the Valve interview thing, there was like, they were super cool with me and who were like, hey, maybe we can, you know, take some of that dance stuff and we could turn it into a thing that you can put in the game. Like you can get it on the Manco store or whatever, you know. But essentially, like that was, God, it's taken me a long bloody time to get here, isn't it? But sorry for going on a bit. But that was essentially the mid-level crisis point where I was like, well, I totally could just keep doing this thing that I'm doing, which is like this cynically successful sort of empty thing where I'm just like desperately trying to get in the room with the right people and sort of learning animation on the way, but not really, not brilliantly.
Yeah,
Just
you're not really that interested in it. It really wasn't that fulfilling to you.
yeah, I was kind of just like just jackhammering my way through, just like it's silly, and so I didn't do the Manco Team Fortress 2 dance stuff and all that thing.
Take them up on that.
Yeah, and I just got seriously into making this indie game, and actually like pretty soon I was realizing like, oh, this is the thing that I was trying to do at the start. Like this is the thing that's
You went
like
like a full round. You went on in like the most roundabout way. You were trying to do the like get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
And it literally took like the longest route you could ever.
it's
take
true.
onto
I could have
it.
gotten rich so much quicker.
Yes, that's.
Hang on, no, I'm falling back into old patterns again. Yeah, no, essentially learning like there's no shortcut essentially to, well, first of all, to like being fulfilled in your career, but also to becoming good at something or becoming like a person that's of any value to the society and the world. That's actually slightly overselling my current value. But yeah, and so then I just like put in hard graft for 4 years, like learning how to develop games, and it was the thing. It was like being a dungeon master, you know, as a 15-year-old again, which is all I've ever wanted.
Good job on being a huge nerd still.
Yeah, that still is true. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Is that the end of my story?
Yes.
Ta-da!
We did it. We made it. We are all here. Well, anyway, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you, Esther, and thank you, Jim, for sharing that. I hope that that was fulfilling in a way for hearing that James was a full-time grasper, and Esther was almost the cause of the death of video games. And Jim gave a very good pitch on why you should play the games that he makes. So I hope that that was fulfilling for everyone. But thank you guys for joining us, and I'm going to throw it over to Tim for an interview, possibly now. Thank you guys.